2017 starting out with a lot of different things going on. We got Jeff Sessions that just got sworn in. We had some weird reefer madness coming in. Earlier in the year, we heard about this nausea that people get from smoking weed, and really they have no science to really connect it to weed, and they just tell people you smoke too much weed. Yeah, smoking too much weed, smoking too much dabs or whatever, that could make you nauseous. Now we have a new one. Is your medical marijuana safe? UC Davis doctors say dangerous bacteria and fungi can be lurking in your pot. All right, so forget about all the Mexican brown weed that was grown moldy and full of pesticides and fungicides and stuff. Forget about the fact that it was smuggled on mules with, dryer sheets and stuff in there to keep it from smelling. Forget about all that because people smoked that for decades and never reported any ill effects from smoking. We also have like studies that show you that, people that smoke cigarettes, because they also smoke weed, it negated the negative effects of smoking cigarettes. But let's forget about all that and let's listen to these research doctors at UC Davis. So researcher George Thompson, Dr. George Thompson, advises cancer patients and others with weakened immune systems to avoid vaping or smoking marijuana. Jose Luis Villegas, the Sacramento Bee. In uneasy news for medical marijuana users, UC Davis researchers have identified potentially lethal bacteria on mold on samples from 20 Northern California pot growers and dispensaries, leading the doctors to warn patients with weakened immune systems to avoid smoking, vaping, or inhaling aerosolized cannabis. For the vast majority of cannabis users, this is not of great concern, said Dr. George Thompson, professor of UC Davis Department of Medical Microbiology and Immunology. But those with weakened immune systems, such as from leukemia, lymphoma, AIDS, or cancer treatments, could unwittingly be exposing themselves to serious lung infections when they smoke or vape medical marijuana. We strongly advise them to avoid it, Thompson said. Now, this is so far full of platitude, full of, I guess you could say, unfounded correlations, and that's what we continue to see when people are coming out with negative information about marijuana. They never have studies to back it up. Never. Now, right here, typical patients with lower functioning immune systems are advised to avoid unwashed fruits or vegetables and cut flowers because they may harbor potentially harmful bacteria and mold or fungi. Marijuana belongs in that same risk category, according to Thompson. And that risk category is really low. And, of course, you're going to look at what you're consuming or what you have around you, fruits and vegetables, cut flowers, etc. And if you see a bunch of mold on it, obviously you're going to get that away from you. Now, when you're talking about cannabis, it's microscopic. You can't even see it, even if it is there. And if you can see it, it's probably like you're going to look at the marijuana and be like, I'm not going to smoke that. Cannabis is not on that list, and it's a big oversight, in our opinion, Thompson said. It's basically dead vegetative material and always covered in fungi. And that's true of all dead organic material. It's always covered in fungi. This is nothing new. This is nothing to be concerned about, to be alarmed about. So who cares if you even put cannabis on the list of things that you should warn people to avoid because it might harbor the fungus? We don't care if you tell people that. That's not going to stop anybody from using medical marijuana. You're just trying to scare people away from medical marijuana, and you don't have no study to back it up or no science. And right here, he even proves it. The study began several years ago after Dr. Joseph Toscano, a UC Davis blood cancer specialist, began seeing leukemia patients who were developing rare, very severe lung infections. One patient died even. Now, you might have remembered seeing an article about a week ago talking about how there's a doctor actually linking these deaths to people smoking medical marijuana because they have found these funguses in the medical marijuana samples that they looked at. And Whatever. Okay, so we'll go on. Suspecting there might be a link between the infections and his patient's use of medical marijuana, Toscano teamed up with Thompson to study whether soil-borne pathogens might be hiding in the marijuana samples, the medical marijuana samples. Well, it's nice that you want to look at all the possibilities out there, but this so-called study that began several years ago, they never did conclude anything. They never did anything, but, here we go. They gathered samples from 20 different growers and dispensaries. This is not connected at all to anything else going on. This is just 20 random places where they decided to go get some medical marijuana samples. Didn't have anything to do with his patients. Could have been, there's no way you can say that these samples and your patient's samples had the same contaminants in them, or whatever the contaminants may be. So 20 growers in California dispensaries by Steep Hill Labs, a cannabis testing company in Berkeley. It was distilled into DNA samples and sent to UC Davis for analysis, which found multiple kinds of bacteria and fungi, some of which are linked to serious lung infections. Sure, but are these things, this is so broad of a swipe. Yeah, they might have had little microscopic amounts of these different fungi in these samples, and even bacterias for that matter. But were these the same bacterias that are found in other things? Are they found pretty commonly everywhere? Yeah, they are. And are they found in concentrations that are dangerous to humans in cannabis samples? No, they're not. And is there any proof that if you smoke or vaporize any of these substances that has this fungi in there, that the fungi is going to make it to your lungs and then spread inside your lungs through smoke or vapors? Now, do you have any of these studies to prove any of that? If not, whatever you're testing for didn't have anything to do with your patients and how they died. I don't think. The study doesn't connect that. So here's the end of that. There was a surprisingly large number of bacteria and mold, says Donald Land, a UC Davis chemistry professor who is chief science consultant for Steep Hill Labs. The analysis found numerous types of bacteria and fungi, including organic pathogens that can lead to particularly deadly infections known as mucor. And a lot of things can lead to mucor, especially with patients whose immune systems are compromised because of chemotherapy and radiation. And these people, they're looking for an excuse. These people that have chemo and radiation get these lung infections all the time because their immune systems are weak and because you are constantly being inundated with these fungi. And the ones that cause mucor, your body already has them in there. So it's just the fact that your immune system is down and these fungus are able to thrive better. Quote, there's a misconception by people who think that because it's from a dispensary, then it must be safe. That's not the case, said UC Davis Toscano. Now, there's his blanket statement that he assumes. Now, I've never heard that. Nobody assumes that the medicine you buy from the dispensary is safe just because it's from the dispensary. But one thing we do know is it's safer because it's from a dispensary. You know that it's a little bit more trustworthy than if you just went and bought this marijuana from somebody on the street corner. Basically they're acting like they're going to have a solution for this with some kind of pesticides or just making weed in a lab or something. So, quote, this is potentially a direct inoculation into the lungs of these contaminated organisms, especially if you use a bong or vaporization techniques. How do you know that? Do you have a study that proves that? Because you've analyzed these marijuana samples before smoking them, but what does smoking them do? When you put a flame or you heat it up so hot that it vaporizes the marijuana, what does it then do to the fungus? Is this a really good delivery system for fungus into the lungs? I mean, for real. Anyway, they don't have them studies. We don't have anything that shows that if you smoke something with mold or fungus, which is the same thing, if you smoke something with fungus in it, that it's going to translate, the fungus goes into your lungs, and therefore spores develop into mycelia, and next thing you know it, your lungs are full of mold. That's not how it works, man. Please tell me that you've researched this and that you think that's how it works, because I don't think that's how it works. But you haven't demonstrated that with this so-called study. Patients with compromised immune systems are especially susceptible to infections usually acquired in their environment or in the hospital. Bingo! I mean, the hospitals are where these infections are lurking and thriving and festering, and they're there. We know that. They're in places like that. Jails, hospitals, schools. That's where the infections like these spread like crazy. Now, do some of the people that have the infection or contract the infection, have they been medical marijuana patients? Probably. Did some of the marijuana they smoked have fungus on it? Maybe. Was that the fungus that they're talking about? I still don't see any correlation or connection that they've made. But given the testing results, Toscano said, it's possible that even some more common infections, such as aspergillus, could also be attributed to contaminated medical marijuana. Sure, it could also be contributed to everywhere else that it comes from. It's one of the most common fungal infections or molds that's out there. So Toscano emphasized that until more research is done, he can't be 100% assured that contaminated cannabis caused the infections, but it's highly suspicious. Well, you know, it's highly suspicious that you guys don't have to have any real studies when you want to say that cannabis causes something bad or is dangerous, but you don't really ever prove it. You always have this, well, we can't be 100% sure, but, you know, hey, be suspicious. You guys never have 100% certainty on the bad things, but you expect the test to be 100% for anything good. Even though we've demonstrated time and time again that this plant is nothing but medicine, you still want to call it Schedule 1 narcotic, no medicinal value. It's under, you know, it's ridiculous. Under California's Proposition 64, the voter-approved initiative that eased restrictions on personal marijuana use, the state is expected to have cannabis testing regulations in place for medical marijuana by January 1st. Patient safety is our chief concerns in the process, said Alex Traverso, spokesman for the State Bureau of Medical Cannabis Regulation, in an email. He said the state's new medical marijuana testing standards will soon be available for public view. We welcome everyone's input to ensure the testing standards are as strong as we need them to be. Until then, consumers are largely on their own. The vast majority of cannabis sold in California is not tested according to land. This is just a scaremongering, fear-mongering, you know, incite fear into the public about medical marijuana, especially the sickest among us, the people that are dying of cancer and getting chemo, the people that have HIV or wasting syndrome from some other terrible affliction. And they're telling them people that are on their last leg, please don't smoke marijuana, because the fungus that was in there that somebody forgot to do something about when it was growing or somewhere along the line, that fungus could kill you. Nothing is farther from the truth, people. This is just pure propaganda from the cancer industry. The cancer industry makes billions of dollars a year off of sick people, and this is just another one of their little scare tactics to scare you out of doing real therapy. All right, to avoid the risk of exposure to severe lung infections, Thompson and Toscano advised cancer patients and others with hampered immune systems to avoid smoking, vaping, or inhaling aerosolized cannabis altogether. Cannabis edibles, such as baked cookies or brownies, could be a safer alternative. Theoretically, Thompson said, the consumption of cooked edibles seems safer than smoking or vaping, but that's not scientifically proven. So again, he's pulling stuff out of his ass, literally. Oh, yeah, eating cookies and stuff. It could be safer than smoking, theoretically. There's no science to back that up. In fact, like I said, you don't have any real proof that just by smoking fungus, it's going to go inside your lungs and grow inside your lungs. And I got I got an answer for that. But he'll say this, quote, I give that with advice with a caveat. We don't know if it's safer. We think it probably is, he said. And he's talking about eating marijuana as opposed to smoking it. It depends on how much marijuana you need to ingest for your medical condition. You know, if you're a cancer patient and you need to ingest a gram of Simpson oil a day, smoking it's not really going to be a good idea, man. It's going to blow your lungs off. So for patients heeding the UC Davis advice to avoid smoking or vaping medical marijuana, quote, it's always better to err on the side of caution, said medical marijuana advocate Cargile. There are plenty of alternatives, she noted, including cannabis salves, lotions, sprays, tinctures, and suppositories. Well, this comes from the Sacramento Bee, and here's some other articles that they have. And just by listening to the headlines of these articles, you can get a kind of an idea of what kind of reefer madness angle they're operating out of over here at the Sacramento Bee. And if you want to give Claudia a buck, throw her an email, or hell, it looks like you can even call her on the phone. There's her phone number, and her email is @ClaudiaBuck, or maybe that's her Twitter handle. It's my experience is that's a Twitter handle. But there you go. You can let her know that when you see this article, you don't know what to think, because these aren't real studies. This isn't a real study, and they don't have no real correlation between fungus that's in cannabis samples and fungus that's in lungs and fungus that's people that are dying of cancer. Well, here's some other articles you can get from this fine publication. Deadly bacteria and fungus found in cannabis samples in Northern California. We heard that. More pregnant women use pot for morning sickness. Studies find. That raises concerns. And why should it raise concerns? They're passing out weed, man. It's crazy. Pot backers hand out 8,000 free joints. Why is that crazy? How should California regulate pot? Teamsters are weighing in. Teamsters, why would they be involved in regulating pot? That doesn't make any sense. Oh, I know, because they want to drive pot around in their Teamster mobiles, get a little cut of the money. Whoa, sorry about that. Everybody wants a cut of the money. You notice the marijuana industry popping up, whether it's the recreational or the medical. You know what else is popping up around it? Is a bunch of hands reaching into the pockets of the people that produce and process the marijuana. And finally, the dog is high, and it's not funny. Well, it isn't funny, and why should it be? But it isn't something to be concerned about either, because dogs are mammals, and like all mammals, they are equipped with an endocannabinoid system. So it's not funny if you don't give your dog cannabis as medicine, because that's the natural choice. That's the medicine that all animals are equipped to handle, because there's a system inside your body to handle it with cannabinoid receptors. Every cell has it, all the way down to blood. Every drop of blood has cannabinoid receptors in them, and that goes for dogs and cats too. So do some studying if you want to know about that. But if you want to know about reefer madness, these guys at the Sacramento Bee are full of it. So if you look up cannabis fights fungi, that's just like a Google search, you get thousands and thousands of articles written from everywhere, from colleges. Up here at the top, we have the National, that's a government, National Institute on Health, all the way down to My Chronic Relief and other weed publications. Even down at the bottom, there's www.fundosian-canna, don't know what that means, but microbiological study and quantification cannabinoids. Basically comes down to CBG, one of the cannabinoids in marijuana. This cannabinoid is found early on in the growth cycles, which makes it somewhat difficult to find in large quantities. CBG, however, is non-psychoactive. This means it can be cultivated via hemp. The medical potential of CBG make it prime target for research these days. Here's what the science says so far. Cannabigerol is another one of the cannabinoids tested on MRSA versus the MRSA virus in 2008. As far as antibiotic properties go, CBG was stronger than CBN and comparable to CBD. CBG is also known to be mildly antifungal. Research as early as 1982 found that isolated CBG is antimicrobial and kills various types of bacteria and fungi. Killing bacteria with cannabis. Here's a whole article about it. Marijuana is a source of antibacterial agents that are potent against, and pharmacists and chemists have found another use for the multi-purpose cannabis as a source of antibacterial chemicals for multi-drug resistant bacteria. Ironically, inhaling cannabis is known to damage the lungs ability to fend off invading pathogens, but the ingredients in cannabis, particularly the cannabinoids, have antiseptic properties. Although scattered research has been conducted since the 1950s, no comprehensive study existed that relates the structure of cannabinoids with the antibacterial activity. Giovanni Appendino, Simon Gibbons, and coworkers attempted to remedy that problem by examining the activity of 5 common cannabinoids and their synergetic derivatives. And here's the 5 most common cannabinoids. You have delta-9 tetracannabinol, cannabidiol, cannabigerol, cannabinol, and cannabichromine. All 5 cannabinoids, THC, CBD, CBG, CBC, and CBN, were potent against bacteria. Notably, they perform well against bacteria that were known to be multi-drug resistant, like strains of MRSA that plagued the UK hospitals. CBG and CBD have most potential for consumer use because they are non-psychotropic. Besides identifying antibacterial capacity, the researchers wanted to figure out why these cannabinoids are so good at killing bacteria. They obviously are very effective at specifically targeting some vital process in the bacteria. These cannabinoids are promising enough to warrant rigorous clinical trials. They are applicable as topical antiseptics, biodegradable antibacterial compounds for cosmetics, and systematic antibacterial agents. So if you don't understand what the second one was, biodegradable antibacterial compounds for cosmetics. Currently, cosmetics are produced with some non-biodegradable, questionable at best, weird compounds and synthetics. So if you could replace that with something natural that already has like biodegradable and antibacterial compounds in it, wouldn't you rather? So yeah, that's it. That's all she wrote. And the studies you can look up, go all the way back to like, I found them as early as in the 1970s that you can still find on the internet that talk about how, cannabis fights bacteria. Cannabinoids, especially when they started studying CBG, a lot of the studies didn't come in until about 2007 to 2010 on CBG, and CBN. 2012 is where a lot of those came from. But basically, this is basically common knowledge in the scientific community. And now you have these people at UC Davis who are heavy in the cancer industry, out there just basically spreading misinformation, propaganda, lies, and they don't have no studies to back it up. Again, time and time again, we are asked to put aside our skeptical scrutiny and take your magnifying glass and put that away. I have one of these. This is a USB magnifying glass, and I can look at whatever's on the marijuana, and I look at it all the time, and I see powdery mildew here and there, and I see what it looks like on a plant, and I see what you do to get rid of it. And there was another side note to all these articles that were coming out about these pathogens that were found in medical marijuana samples. I'm not saying that they didn't find these in the samples. I'm just saying they have no science to back any of this up, saying that this is hurting people. Now, if you are a person with any kind of asthmatic reaction to marijuana, smoking marijuana is always going to make you cough. And then if you have perfectly healthy lungs, you shouldn't cough if you smoke marijuana. If you do, it could be that there's pathogens in there. And when they burn really hot, and the smoke is definitely is harsh. We'll say that. I almost want to say if you light up some moldy weed, it's going to smell kind of like a campfire. Is what I compare it to. I've smelled it before. It's gross. You don't want to give that to people with lung problems because it's just harsh, and you got to smoke more of it to get the same effects because the THC count's going to be lower because there's other stuff in there besides THC. So yeah, contaminated weed. I'm not out here sticking up, putting up a fight for contaminated weed. Weed should be tested. There should be no fungus in your weed. As far as these bacteria stuff that they're talking about, I don't know what that is, but generally speaking, it doesn't come from the fungus. It could be that the plant is so sick that there's other things attacking it besides just fungus. And then the end result of those things is bacteria. So, I'm not sticking up for contaminated weed, but what I am saying is people have been smoking a lot less tested weed, a lot more contaminated weed for decades, even centuries, and we have nobody that's ever died from it, nobody that's ever been proven to be, contracting fatal lung infections from marijuana. So you need to do more studies. Just like you tell us we need to do more studies because marijuana is not medicine. We say that's bullshit, but we're like, okay, well, where's your studies that said it's not medicine? Where's all your studies that say, you keep telling us that it's dangerous? Show me a study. Tell me a danger and show me a study. This is not that. So, and one last caveat to this is that you get a lot of people talking about the pesticides. You had a problem in Oregon because they had pesticide issues and tested marijuana, and the pesticides were just too high. You had spinosad, and it was just way more than you were allowed by law. Well, if you look at what you're allowed the spinosad by law, they're talking about food that you eat, vegetables that you would eat, and they're talking about per gram or whatever. You're going to eat a lot more than a gram of a fruit or a vegetable. So if there's supposed to be 56 parts per billion or parts per million per gram or whatever of tested material, the marijuana, might be higher than what you're doing, but you're not smoking 10 pounds of this shit at a time. You're doing a very small amount, and you're not consuming the spinosad on a big scale. I handle spinosad all the time. It's not that dangerous, people. It has been linked to infections in humans, but it's typically, you're never going to see it in that kind of dose in a sample of marijuana, man. So that in itself, and there's another study that I've seen, I hate to say it, but I don't even want to repeat this. People are saying that these pesticides and fungicides used in marijuana, which what I use is all organic, so this can't be possibly true. I use spinosad for bugs, and everybody uses potassium bicarbonate that I know of for treating fungi, which is organic material that's easily washed away from your plant when you're done growing it. So there you have that. Neither of them are harmful to humans in any way, shape, or form in a sample amount the size of a marijuana sample. And someone said something about these pesticides or fungicides cause autism in children. That is the most insane scare tactic I've ever heard when it comes to marijuana. And no, there's definitely no link between any pesticide that I know of that's used to grow marijuana, even the chemical ones that are in the weed growing world. You look at those as last resort. You only use them on really young plants so that there's no chance of it being even in trace amounts later on down the line. Not because they're dangerous to human consumption, but just because they're gross. Like if you have a marijuana bud that has chemical pesticides residue in it, that's not really harmful to you, and it's not going to give your kids autism, but it's going to taste like shit, and it's going to make you probably sick if you smoke too much of it just because it's just gross. So people that use chemical pesticides growing marijuana, I don't appreciate that. Nobody does, and at least if they're trying to at least be respectable with their final product at all, they're going to do something to get rid of it in the final analysis so that it's not a major part of the experience of that marijuana. I'm just babbling on at this point. I think I covered the meat of the story at the beginning, and now I'm just kind of babbling because these people are out there coming up with new reefer madness all the time. And this just don't deserve the light of day, UC Davis. Come out with a study that shows the correlation. Show us how smoking, even put some anthrax spores in your joint and smoke it. Next thing you know it, you have anthrax. Maybe, I don't know. Is that how it works? You didn't show me how that works. So you can't just say just because this marijuana bud was contaminated with this fungi in a small petri dish, microscopic level, that it's going to cause lung infections, even with people with weakened immune systems. I don't buy it.